Hello, I'm Ann Taylor, contributing editor and your host for this webcast, which is titled Enterprise Data as a Service. It is brought to you by IDG and Persistent. In this discussion, you will hear from several experts about why the data landscape has changed, the challenges and business requirements for data insights, and best practices toward a modern approach to delivering data as a service. Our speaker panel includes Vikas Gupta. He is the Senior Vice President of Service Lines with Persistent. Noelle Johanna is the Vice President and Principal Analyst with Forrester Research. Sam Krishnamurti is the Vice President of Crawford & Company. Anusha Kamar is the Vice President with Constellation Brands. And Samantha Gibson is the Worldwide Lead for AWS Data Exchange. Let's start with an overview of data as a service. Vikas, could you please tell us Persistent's viewpoint on this?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and joining this conversation. Let me kick off the conversation today by introducing Persistent to the audience here. Persistent is a 30-year-old company, and we are known in the industry for our digital engineering and enterprise modernization capabilities. We are about 15,000 employees globally. We operate in 18 countries. And we are known in the industry for bringing software engineering capabilities for our clients who are looking to transform digitally or who are looking to move their digital presence to the cloud. And data practice is one of the biggest and the strongest practice within Persistent. So at Persistent, we have believed that digital acceleration is being driven through data as a service. The reality that all of us face is that the number of data sources within our organizations are exploding. We've got batch data, we've got streaming data, we've got data sitting in Excel files, we've got data sitting in unstructured sources like digital, like social media, etc. And therefore, for us as organizations, to really leverage the huge amount of data that we are exposed to requires a different sort of thinking. It requires almost a thinking which is data as a service. And it's a pleasure to be participating in this conversation today. Some of the tenets that all of us are facing as we see this ubiquitous data around us are, how do we generate more value from data, right? It is not simply about monetization of the data sources that we have, but to really leverage our data assets to innovate in the business. That innovation can come in several ways. It can come as innovation in products and services that you offer. It could come as innovation in our processes. It could come as innovations in the way and manner that we engage with our stakeholders, be it our employees or be it our customers. One of our clients, for example, which is in the healthcare industry, is really looking to innovate in terms of how they are bringing digital capabilities using machine learning to life for scanning for tumors and cancers in the body. And there we are helping them build this machine learning algorithm, which will help them to look at digital scans and think about this whole capability very differently. How do you bring better innovation, better speed, and better accuracy, and better outcomes to their customers who are coming to them for getting better healthcare. Similarly, businesses are looking to engage much more deeply with business outcomes. Gone are the days when the chief data officer of a company was the custodian of data. Data officers today are really collaborating across businesses because the reality of the matter is that data is all pervasive, and the data officer is being looked upon to drive deeper collaboration. So one of the banks that we work with are becoming very savvy in terms of how they use the data to understand their customers better. And all this is just made possible because there is a deep collaboration between the business stakeholders at the bank as well as the data scientists in the bank, and who are bringing these insights together for the bank to be able to serve their customers better with newer insights and newer capabilities. Similarly, everyone is thinking about how can they bring better access, better analytics, better AI/ML for everyone across the organization, right? It's about enabling and empowering the data scientists, the citizen data scientists at the edges, and giving them the tools and the capabilities to be able to do more. And this is where you are seeing, several technologies like RPA, like low-code, no-code platforms coming together along with AI/ML capabilities to really enable that access, enable faster decision making at the edges. Data security, privacy, and regulations have been around for a long time. It is all about balancing how much access to be provided to your citizen data scientists vis-a-vis the data democratization journey that you guys are on. And therefore, in my mind, it is not just about how much of access that you want to give, but really how are you educating your stakeholders on data regulations and what they can do and what they cannot do. Similarly, all of us are being asked to do more with less. It's not just about, taking away resources from us, but, what's happened over the years is that with the acceleration to cloud, or with the acceleration to move to cloud, with the massive increases in compute and storage, we have available to us more resources which we can deploy and which we can make really meaningful use of for automating, for taking on initiatives with lesser resources, and are able to deliver far more output and throughput using those assets that we had. Lastly, and not least, over the years, a lot of us have invested a lot of money in systems of record and systems of engagement, which is our mobile applications, our website, our digital engagement channels. And I strongly feel that the next few years are going to be all about infusing intelligence into these applications. And therefore, you would almost see a layer of system of intelligence become available. And I think that's a key tenet of data as a service, which will allow us to really leverage and bring intelligence into our systems.
Let's hear from Noelle Johanna. He is the Vice President and Principal Analyst with Forrester Research. Noelle, please describe to our listeners the trends that are driving change and the need for data as a service.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on this topic of interest to a lot of customers around data as a service. In fact, as an analyst, I speak to many organizations, and they obviously are concerned about data because there's obviously a data explosion happening, and there's obviously data distribution happening between hybrid cloud and multi-cloud environments. I, as an analyst, get to speak to 3 to 4 customers every day. These are mostly global organizations, and when I look into the discussions I'm having, obviously all of these organizations want to accelerate those business initiatives and digital transformation initiatives they're trying to do, right? And that obviously is a big challenge itself, because you got a variety of data, you got silos of data, you're building these modern applications. So how do you get to these modern applications in a more accelerated manner? Because think about it, 10 years ago, we are building one application in a year. There we're down to building applications in a week, right? That changes everything. And also we need to do this in more real time as well, right? Which is, I think, very, very critical for organization as well. What we're seeing is that, as we know it, data has become one of the most critical assets for organizations out there, right? And if you look at it from that perspective, there is obviously the need for having traditional architectures and newer architectures as well. So that actually makes a big difference. But what we have seen is that data has become one of the most critical assets. In fact, 51% of organizations are commercializing on data. You can buy and sell data today, actually. And this number is going to increase to 85% in the next 5 years. So it becomes a huge opportunity, right? And sometimes people shy away from data. That, hey, I got lots of data. We can't really use this data. And that's a terrible thing, right? Because at the end of the day, data really generates a lot of potential for the business, right? It improves customer experience, enables innovation, it drives better customer retention, right? Increased revenue. So all of these factors are there. So in fact, organizations who have used more data in their organizations for applications and insights have gotten better success in terms of their revenues, in terms of having more customer adoption and retention as well, right? So that's a very important point. Data obviously is very, very critical, I guess. But the biggest challenge, I think, with organizations that are running is that traditional architectures, which we have built over the last many, many years, are failing to meet the business requirements. If you look at it, the data moves from these transactional systems to the operational systems to the analytical systems. And by the time it gets leveraged, like in a dashboard, it's like 24 hours late, right? I mean, this is the reality, right? There's also many different copies of data. In fact, more than 35% of data in an organization is duplicated. Very interesting, right? People don't know exactly where do you want to go with the system of record. And the whole issue is which copy do you really go after, right, for applications. And this is something which we are hearing from customers all the time, right? So the data challenges which people are running into that it's not agile enough, the platform is not agile enough, we got performance issues, we got all these scale issues going on. We got these platforms which are dealing with mostly, structured data. What about unstructured data? What about semi-structured data as well, right? And that's a big issue. And time to value is critical as well, right? And this is something which we see all the time. What businesses need is this new approach of connecting the silos, right? I mean, we have got these silos of data on premises, and then we got data in the cloud and multi-cloud and edges as well, right? We got data all over the place, right? How do we drive consistency of data? How do you drive this real-timeness of data? And this is a big challenge because sometimes you can build at this application tier, but the application tier may not be able to get consistency of data because depending on what sources you're using, right? And that's the notion of data as a service, which has evolved over the last few years, is that you want to be able to drive this consistency of data, right? So that's exactly the whole premise behind the data as a service kind of implementation. Basically, we are dynamically orchestrating this disparate data sources in a more self-service manner to support these applications and analytics and use cases through APIs and industry standard protocols like ODBC, JDBC, JSON. So this comes back to the point as I mentioned, right? A lot of data is scattered over different regions, different repositories. We got silos issues. We got data in different formats and different speed. Sometimes the speed of data is more real time. Sometimes the data is not real time. But the more scenario is around the accuracy of data, right? And especially for insights and analytical scenarios as well, right? So APIs plays a big role, we believe. In fact, no one wants to go and connect to like a Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn or Amazon, Google, and all these Azure data sources and start to leverage API and with extensibility where you're going to learn these API scenarios in more details. But sometimes you just need the basic API just to connect to the data and get the data. That's it, right? Forget about how the data is integrated behind the scenes. Like you may be integrating 1,000 sources, right? Do you want to do that at the application tier or the data tier, right? That's what the whole premise behind is that you do it at the data as a service layer, as we call data layer, which is where this is going as well, right? One of the approaches to data as a service is data virtualization, which has been around for more than a decade now, but now obviously has been getting a lot of traction because of the silos of data we have on premises and cloud and multi-cloud scenarios. And data virtualization, if you look at this diagram, you will actually see a lot of composure of different components, including metadata and caching layer as well, along with API protocols to access the data from these different variety of applications you're building, right? And that's some of the fundamentals of data virtualization. And it's not like a repository per se. It's mostly to connecting the data in terms of the silos of data, but also storing certain critical data in memory with caching as well, right? So data virtualization has evolved over the last several years, but the focus is around agility. The focus is around a real-timeness of data. It's got a contextualization of data, to providing context of data as to what data is there. And then you make one single call, and that call accesses the data from the 1,000 sources. That's what API and data as a service is delivering, right? Instead of having 1,000 calls made by the application, the 1,000 calls is done at a data layer. then the application only makes one call. And that's what data as a service is driving. It's agility. You can create a value proposition of this, and this is what we're seeing in the financial services industries, in the banks, in the healthcare organizations, in the manufacturing organizations who are building these data as a service platforms for different types of use cases. And I'll get into the use cases what customers are building. But this platform obviously has become critical, especially as you have all these silos of data coming in. So the typical use cases we see are a variety of them, actually, from customer 360, people are building, to microservices applications you're going to be building. Microservices fundamentally is that you have microservices application you're building, a microservice could connect to one data source. Another microservices could connect to another data source. You have 1,000 microservices, you're connecting with 1,000 databases or data platforms. And that could be a nightmare. I was speaking to one of the Fortune 100 companies, and that exactly is the problem, where data services is exactly where they went to implement, because it wanted to have a consistency of data at a single layer as opposed to making those calls, right, across thousands of sources. So data service helps you with analytics. It helps you with application building. You're doing edge and smart application building. You're doing fraud detection. You're doing risk assessments. You're doing, obviously, telco-related analytics and other vertical industry analytics. It basically helps you build these applications a lot quicker, but also deliver these insights a lot faster as well, right? So that's the fundamental behind this. And it's a wide variety of things what people can do with data as a service. What recommendations is that we have for you is that obviously start with a few data sources when you're implementing data as a service. Don't boil the lake, I guess, right? When you start with 5, 10 sources and go over a period of time, have 100 sources, and then you go to 1,000 sources, and some of the mature organizations have 1,000 sources. They have obviously SaaS sources, you got cloud sources, you got edge sources, you got sensor sources, you got all these other types of clickstream sources coming in and legacy sources coming in as well, right? So that's a fundamentally important point. Start with a few sources. Number 2, leverage APIs, right, for your data as a service, especially as you're building these modern applications to drive results as well, right? To really provide you that integrated layer of data from these silos and into the application layer, right? Keep security in mind. Very, very important. Security is fundamentally one of the most important things as the data as a service, because you don't want to obviously have this platform being leveraged by all the developers and data engineers and business analysts and business users, because you may have sensitive data. You have PII, PHI data sitting in the data as a service. How do you protect that, right? So that's important. You want to make sure governance is around this and security is around that as well. And last not least is, data as a service can have support for multiple use cases, not just one use case, as I mentioned, like Customer 360. You could be doing IoT analytics. You could be doing microservices. You could be doing Customer 360 or risk analytics on the same platform, right, on the data as a service platform. So definitely it's got a lot of variety of use cases which people build today.
Let's hear from Sam Krishnamurti, the Vice President of Crawford & Company. Sam, could you discuss the B2B viewpoint and the importance of data today?
Thanks, Karen. Hi, all. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Crawford & Company is the world's largest publicly listed independent provider of claims management and outsourcing solutions to our carriers, brokers, and corporations. We have an expansive network of global experts serving clients in more than 70 countries, and we handle claims in more than 150 countries. Our innovative portfolio of technology-driven solutions are leading the industry and advancing our purpose to restore and enhance lives, businesses, and communities across the globe. At Crawford, restore is more than a word. It's an integral part of our mission, vision, and values. With that said, I'm excited as Crawford marks the 80th anniversary this year. We have 3 business lines where we offer high-quality technology solutions on the forefront to our customers. First is loss adjusting, where we provide services for our global property and casualty market, combining low and high complexity claims across the spectrum losses ranging from 5K to 5 billion US dollars. Second, platform solution. This is an alternate channel to loss adjusting services. We provide a marketplace for existing and new disruptive services. Two main units which needs to be called out here, which is managed repair, which is our contractor network connection, and network businesses. That includes our catastrophic, Vigolook, and Crawford inspection services. Third, TPA, which is our third-party administration of Broadspire. We provide services across workers' comp, liability, accident and health, disability, and medical managed claims. And we also provide legal services such as recovery, fraud, and litigation. Let me give you some context on what matters most for a policyholder in the insurance space. First, how effectively is my insurance claim handled? Second, how quickly it is handled. And last but not least, the most critical and contributor to the customer is the speed of settlement. This is a game changer for the policyholder. And today we are seeing a wide variety of insurtech, which are the technology-led companies in the insurance space, are now entering the insurance sector, bringing a paradigm shift, disrupting the traditional insurance model, and also extending innovation, creating a competitive threat to incumbents, but also potentially a lot of valuable opportunities. Is this a threat to digital transformation? Yes. Some companies see this as a threat, and some companies see this as an opportunity. The winners in this race will those who understand your customer, expertise, and provide claims resolution, and most importantly, offering that digital offerings to increase that policyholder experience. Last but not least, the insurance industry in the midst of a digital transformation and automation and claims processing, and to provide quality assurance. Here at Crawford, we are not just embracing change, but we are leading it. Crawford improves the claims journey via workflow, automation, enhanced data and analytics, reduced cycle time, and we provide superior quality. We are providing several benefits by integrating digitization into the claims process, and we're seeing several benefits. We're seeing reduced cycle time, providing efficiency in the process end-to-end, improved quality, creating transparency in the whole process, and last but not least, providing cost savings to our insurers and brokers. Throughout the claim journey, right from first notice of loss to finish repair, Crawford's commitment is to provide digitized claim platforms that reimagine and simplify the claims process, resulting in elevated customer experience outcomes. From adjuster mobilization tools to drone image analysis, we are constantly adding cutting-edge technology to our suite of innovations throughout the life of claim to improve outcomes. So what are the critical success factors on how organizations can adopt to this digital journey? First, it all starts with the strategy. One needs to align the product's offerings to the company's strategy. You need to find some balanced quick wins and strategic product and project offerings, or key initiatives, if you will. And the stakeholders will need to partner with their cross-functional teams to do the due diligence, whether to buy or build technology. And you will need to get a solid support from your leadership and business stakeholders. Implement the high-impact levers, if you will, that deliver tangible results in the near term. Do a proof of concept or an MVP to gain a buy-in from your stakeholders to sustain funds later in the product portfolio. Transformations is a joint effort between the business and the technology teams, and this is a team sport. And then last but not least, building an integrated transformation and a roadmap that addresses your organization's digital maturity is very important so that you can take your solutions and speed up to market at scale. This is some exciting stuff we are doing at Crawford & Company, where we are creating some thought leadership to our clients, converting big data into actionable insights. Let me touch on one of these white papers, which is called Escape of Water. As many of you all know, escape of water has been a growing concern to insurance carriers and risk managers for several years, and one of the largest causes of non-catastrophic losses. The costs are rising, and complexity of water damage claims is increasing the pressure on claims teams to develop innovative solutions to reduce costs without negatively impacting customer outcomes. So what our data science team did at Crawford is analyze and review the claims data to provide the market with insight on the claim cost proportionality, understand the principal causes of an escape of water event, the cost of building reinstatement, the cost of alternate accommodation on claims where customer have been placed, and also the cost of alternate accommodation against the total claim spend for escape of water events. How Crawford is helping to mitigate the cost of escape of water claims? Through a data-driven approach, Crawford is adapting its processes and negotiating with the customers to ensure that we can control the key contributing factors. So we have developed a dedicated escape of water solution to ensure that we are leading the market in terms of controlling claims cost in the critical areas. Likewise, we have done some good work on the weather events as well, where we analyze the impact of claim outcomes and volumes in the UK. The data science team has also used the combination of their own data and government agency data to provide clients with data-driven insights on major weather events. And also on fire, during March of last year, the UK government placed the country into a lockdown in response to the ongoing spread of coronavirus pandemic. So what the data science team did is they analyzed the impact of the lockdown on the UK commercial and domestic fire claims. They also analyzed the regional variations in fire claim numbers, understood the impact of lockdown on causes of fire ignition, and also we were able to analyze the factors contributing to the increase in fire-related claims. And now you can see how we are converting big data into actionable insights.
Let's now hear from Anusha Kamar. He is the Vice President with Constellation Brands. Anusha, please tell us about your business and why delivery of data as a service is important.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about some of the challenges with exploding data in every space. Constellation Brands is a Fortune 500 company with a global operation footprint. We are one of the fastest growing businesses in CPG and primarily operate in 3 different business areas. The beer division is our largest and significantly fast growing business. Along with the demand, there is also a huge production expansion that has been happening over the last couple of years. Although you may not have heard of Constellation Brands, but I'm sure everyone would have enjoyed the family of Corona beer as well as Modelo and Pacifico. Our wine and spirits division is primarily focused on premium and ultra-premium brands such as Meiomi, Kim Crawford, and Prisoner and Schrader. And they have a huge footprint of wineries across the world. Canopy Growth is our latest venture, which really focuses on recreational cannabis 2.0 and is primarily focused right now in Canadian market. Ultimately, Constellation Brand is a company of brand building. So we are courageous brand builders focused on consumer obsession. And I think, to be a consumer obsessed company, data becomes a very critical part to really understand how consumers engage with your brand and how are they behaving towards the brand and how their preferences are changing over the time, which means that we got to really use data-driven insights as a competitive advantage. So let me give you some of the business context on how our data landscape has been becoming very complex. There are definitely business challenges because of the hypergrowth. So the business has been in this growth mode for over the last 8 years. And along with highly automated manufacturing capacity, we are seeing an explosion in a lot of automation data coming from manufacturing side of the things, as well as new business models around new channels. So over the last 2 years, we have seen that the traditional 3-tier distribution business is being disrupted with a lot of new innovative models such as Drizzly's and Instacarts getting into the business of fulfilling consumers' demand. Similarly, there is an ambition from the business to develop a direct-to-commerce muscle, which also demands a lot of data-driven initiatives. We have seen that consumer preferences changes very frequently. And therefore, to really get ahead and understand how consumer behaviors are changing, we got to really understand the emerging trends fairly quickly. Digital media, there has been a big shift from traditional A&P into digital media, which is pretty much driving the personalization need for the marketeers because we want to serve better engagement and campaigns which are personalized to the consumers. With cookieless future coming with the browser changes, it has been becoming even more important to have a very robust data ecosystem built with first-party data and supplemented with second-party data from emerging marketplaces. Innovation demand to support a lot of these emerging trends is always there from the business, but then there are also constraints which are being posed from CCP and GDPR perspective that we have to take into account to make sure the data is secured. On the technology stack side, we have been investing rapidly on core modernization, which has driven the analytics demand even more in the last couple of years. We have been seeing a proliferation of new data sources from a lot of the market data places that business wants to use. Machine learning and real-time analytics has become a new way for the business to really get into automated decision-making. Therefore, these new patterns of analytic workloads have also become quite challenging to get delivered. And then the last thing that we have always struggled with is various business domains really trying to bring their own analytics tools. So they want access to the data, but they want to really have a preference of an analytical tool that they would want to use. With a traditional infrastructure, which is dependent on legacy on-premise data warehouse, supplemented along with some cloud data pipelines, the main challenge that we have seen in the past is that this central pool of hyper-specialized data engineering team working on on-premise data warehouse had become a bottleneck for most of the product development. Along with the lack of the DevOps on the on-premise legacy data warehouse infrastructure, the data ops seemed to be very inefficient. So as we started looking at what a right architectural evolution would be for Constellation, given all of these challenges, we started thinking about how do we really empower business and product teams to be able to leverage data at speed and scale and be able to launch the products very quickly to the market. This is where the data mesh paradigm came into play. This has been a relatively new thinking, but it lines up very nicely to our kind of emerging needs. The key strategy here really is to definitely leverage the cloud data platform and start offering data as a service or data as a product. To me, there are 4 core components of data mesh that we are trying to implement. The first is really domain ownership. So it's a domain-driven design principle to really move the responsibility for publishing analytical data from central groups into the domain itself, because they are closest to the data. Therefore, the domains start owning the responsibility of publishing analytical data to the rest of the organization and other product teams. The second key concept here is really data as a product. So data as a product means that the domain team not only take responsibility for publishing the analytical data, but they are actually making it available in a way that the organization and other teams can very easily discover what data is used. It's addressable and trustworthy in the sense that the domain teams are now responsible to make sure that they are publishing quality analytical data so that there are no doubts on the integrity of the data. Along with self-describing and interoperability, going with it. When I say interoperable, it's really about making sure that the data is being published so that it can be joined easily with other data products and kind of, it starts offering new innovative products on top of that. Federated governance, again, is kind of, the approach to really move the responsibility for governing the data into the domains and yet provide enough guardrails to the teams to make sure that they are publishing data which has high quality, is kind of, meeting the organizational needs, and it is available as an interoperable service. We have been using a cloud platform to enable this, but one of the key aspects that we are leveraging with the cloud is about making available self-service capabilities for the data engineering platform. So when I say self-service, it's really about enabling the product teams, which are now the owner of the analytical data, but they are able to leverage the capabilities of the centralized data engineering platform to really easily publish, do the analytical processing, and make the data available in an easy form. Therefore, they are responsible for the data lifecycle end to end. The approach that we have taken is to really kind of treat this as a major transformation. In last couple of years, as we have been reinventing IT, there has been a cloud-first strategy, as well as transition of IT into a product-centric operating model. So we made the data strategy as a key enabler as part of this transformation strategy and took the sponsorship from the very top. We have been doing a lot of socialization so that the business strategy kind of, is really aligned with how the data mesh architecture is going to enable that transformation. Starting small is always key, but then really tying the use cases to very defined business use cases helps a lot. We had a marketing transformation program that was getting started that really dependent on getting these capabilities in place so that the marketers could start taking advantage of a lot of the data products being made available to start testing a lot of the ideas around personalization. So we have made some of those use cases as key pilot for showcasing the value of doing the data as a product approach in this case. Taking an MVP-led approach is always key. So we are starting small, but we are planning a series of releases that starts delivering MVP domain by domain. The idea is that as teams start learning these new technologies and approaches and get better, we scale the migration based on the MVP that is in focus. I think change management is always the hardest part of this. Technology is easy. So there have been a lot of concerns around legacy teams because the concept of data mesh and moving the accountability and responsibilities for publishing the data into the domain is the hard part for legacy data teams who have always been used to centralized data management and data publishing services. There is also has been concern around how this distributed domain ownership will create problems around governance. And we have been kind of addressing it by making sure that people really understand that the governance at scale for data when it is exponentially growing leverages a lot of automation to enforce the policies at the lowest granular level within the domains. I think the overall concept has been really embraced by the business stakeholders because they really like the idea of getting closer to the data, understanding the availability of data, as well as the faster delivery cycles coming with it. But getting the legacy teams to really adapt and learn this concept is going to be critical for us. So we are putting together a lot of learning programs to make sure that as we execute and make this transition, the teams are ready to change into the new way of thinking. I think something like this is a transformational change, but it needs to be explained as a very compelling story that any business stakeholder can very easily understand how this shift is going to be able to enable in their day-to-day real-time decision-making.
Let's hear from Samantha Gibson, Worldwide Lead for AWS Data Exchange. Samantha, what is the AWS perspective around how data drives decision-making and the need for a modern approach to data delivery?
Thanks, Anne. Really exciting to hear from the other panelists around their business transformation and how they're thinking about data. I'd like to bring a slightly different angle to the conversation, which is really around third-party data. My service, AWS Data Exchange, works with those who are data providers, pushing data out to their customers or their partners or their other third-party counterparts, as well as data subscribers or consumers who are bringing sources in, as Sam and Noelle talked about earlier, so that they can use that data for actionable analytics. I'd like to bring just the third-party perspective into the mix and hear about some of the things my customers have been speaking about across industries and across enterprise sizes. As I said, we have two persona types when we're thinking about third-party data. The left-hand side, those who subscribe to or consume the data, and the right-hand side, those who publish or provide the data. Some of the challenges we were hearing across the board is without constant patterns for sourcing, licensing, and procuring third-party data, business innovation is slower because you can't add those extra variables that really could potentially bulk up or change your analysis. So from subscribers, we were hearing that a lot of our customers are still shipping physical media to one another. They're managing dozens or hundreds of different FTP credentials across their data sources, many of which come with their own security and reliability challenges. And even managing APIs, which most of us might think of as a modern way for transferring data, they still require the subscriber to understand and manage the nuances of those credentials, those endpoints, and then merge it all together with their existing systems. So for the subscriber, the challenge is finding, sourcing, evaluating, and then managing the infrastructure to bring all those third-party sources in to join with their first-party data and facilitate their analytics applications, machine learning models, and other. Flipping to the right-hand side, many of the challenges we hear across our organization are the same challenges that subscribers have, but in reverse. All of that plumbing that the providers need to build to maintain and serve their customers, storing the data, delivering it through different channels, billing, licensing for it, and then understanding how the customers acquire their data and want to use it. That isn't necessarily a competitive differentiator. It's a cost of doing business if they want to be able to provide and publish data. And many of our data providers who do this today have asked AWS if there might be a more efficient way to serve their own customers at scale. So worst of all of these barriers across subscribers and providers prevent organizations that have valuable data to share it securely to others, especially if it isn't part of their core business. And then that, of course, in turn leaves data subscribers who would benefit from that data frustrated that it's not available. So all of these challenges across the board are in the third-party data sourcing and use domain. But I want to take through a workflow that I hear from many of my customers. There's a lot of steps in this workflow, but it's fairly consistent across industries. We have the data discovery process. That's really, I have a hypothesis, something looks interesting, I want to add a variable. In addition to just discovering that data, then I need to think about, is there a license around it? Do I need a contract? On top of that, I then need to think about evaluating the data. Is it useful? What's the metadata? Is this going to work for what I need to do? Once you get through those steps, there's the licensing component where procurement teams get involved. I need a contract. I need to pay. I need to think about terms and conditions. And then we get to the technology. Then we get to the ingestion portion. I want this data to land securely in my cloud environment or in a local environment so that I can actually take action on it. But before I do that, I want to be able to catalog the data. I need to register it. I need to understand the metadata. It may need to be stored in my data lake, my pond, my mesh strategy, like many of the other panelists spoke about. I want to put it alongside my proprietary data. So I need that catalog to be consistent across first, second, and third-party data. Then I need to process it. Not all data is going to be in the form that it's going to be used in. So maybe there's ETL involved. I need to data pipeline it into various applications. Like I need to understand where those applications live. And then maybe I need to recatalog that derived version of the data. So that step really processing and cataloging goes back and forth for our customers. And then finally, we get to the analysis portion, which was the end result here, which is I want to use that data. I want to go do something with it. I want to use it in a machine learning tool, an application, and analytic. And then the cycle repeats itself. So this workflow that I experience with my customers is quite complex. It involves a lot of steps. But most importantly, at an enterprise, it involves a lot of teams. There are different folks that all need to be on the same page to complete this workflow. You might have a data sourcing team working on the discovery and the pre-licensing. You have data analysts and scientists working on the evaluation and the analytics components. You have procurement teams, as I mentioned, who are horizontally working across licensing, sourcing, contracts, billing, invoicing. And then you have the technology team, the data engineers and the data pipelining teams who are actually setting up those ingestion points and that are cataloging the data and that are standing it up and storing it. Fairly complex workload, takes a lot of different personas, and not having a consistent pattern slows down this whole workflow immensely. So what we worked on at AWS is standing up a service called AWS Data Exchange to really solve many of those provider and subscriber challenges that we heard about in my very first slide, and then to speed up or create efficient and secure patterns to streamline that entire workflow from discovery to analysis. So in a nutshell, what Data Exchange looks to address is a consistent single place to find data, whether that's advertised in a public catalog or exchanged privately. Manages those subscriptions across multiple sources. So if you're procuring data across different data domains, different geographies, different industries, you have a one consistent situation to understand all of your subscriptions in one place and understand what you have access to. You can invoice to the extent the data is commercial. Being able to streamline some of those billing and provisioning and invoicing practices has been very useful to our customers. Right alongside their cloud bills, they can understand their data bills and their software bills. So that's fairly interesting. And then, of course, being able to integrate in the rest of the cloud ecosystem or whatever ecosystem the customer is running to actually process and use that data. For providers, Data Exchange is very interesting. Someone mentioned earlier about commercializing data. As I said, having to build all of these various components, whether it's a catalog, whether it's invoicing, billing, licensing, or the actual infrastructure, APIs, FTP sites to deliver the data, it's the cost of doing business, getting the data from A to B. So having a managed service where they can publish data, whether it's an existing portion of their business or a new portion of their business, has made it much more simple and streamlined to get started. And then, of course, for the subscribers, addressing many of those challenges simply in the sourcing and the consistent pattern and getting all of their teams in line to be able to actually experiment speeds up the entire time to innovation and the time to machine usefulness of the data. We talked a little bit about sourcing, and I liked the example earlier in Sam's segment about fire and water risk. We're hearing a proliferation of different data topics. Historically, you can think about the major industries, market data for financial services, healthcare and life science related data in the medical field. But we're hearing a proliferation of sources, whether it's sustainability data in the environmental social governance space, whether it's more granular real estate data for property and claims management, like we heard earlier, location data and geospatial, and extremely popular mobility data, particularly in light of COVID-19, understanding patterns on movement around the globe. These have been really interesting, but not everybody knows where to go. So by providing a single place to search, discover, and then evaluate has been useful for our customers who are thinking about third-party data and trying to marry that to their processes for first-party data. But let's make it real. All this is talk. I'll do a lightweight architecture diagram here. So on the left-hand side, you see those providers. I've just used a few illustrations across domains, across industries. What the Data Exchange allows them to do is programmatically publish their data into the Data Exchange. They can use our API surface. They can maintain their product catalog, whether they have one data feed or hundreds of data feeds. They can present them all in one place in a consistent manner. And they don't have to worry about credentialing. They don't have to worry about poking firewall holes or setting up FTP credentials or S3 bucket sharing credentials and policies. The data resides in Data Exchange as a central ground. On the right-hand side, you have that data subscriber. They may be using a myriad of tools across AWS services, across third-party applications, on-prem, whatever tool they'd like to use on their right-hand side. They need a central place to access that data. So they also have that programmatic surface. So the moment that a new flavor of data is ready from one of their sources, they can land it in their environment, and they can even automate the analytics that they're running on top of it without having to go pull an FTP site, without having to configure a bespoke API call. When they want to add a new data feed and they want to evaluate a different source of data, it's a consistent pattern from Data Exchange into their environment. Well, let's talk a little bit about security and governance. This is a pretty simplistic picture. Let's dive into that purple bubble by peeling back the onion a little further. For enterprises, of course, building up consistent patterns is useful, but it also comes with lots of evaluation on the different ways to bring data into their environment. So everything on this screen is before the data even hits a production-grade environment. Data Exchange, that purple bubble, that service, that managed service that my team works in day and night on, has many components, separating the provider from the subscriber, screening the data for malware and rescreening for malware in the Data Exchange service, making sure the files and the objects are safe, but also allows you to add on other bells and whistles like private marketplaces, which are governed workflows to allow enterprise data users to ask their data stewards or their data admins for permission to even see a data product or to evaluate a vendor or to go through a data due diligence questionnaire. They can set up ring-fenced, curated private marketplaces by business unit or by enterprise to actually create data workflows on how they want to request new third-party sources. They can use identity and access management policies to control who's able to license, who's able to subscribe, and then who's able to technically export into an environment. And they can use different endpoints, so they don't have to be using the internet. They can be using a private link, AWS's virtual private cloud integrations to bring data into their environment through private link. So this is just one illustration on some of how our enterprises are bulking up their security to create these consistent patterns with different permission levels, with different technical interfaces, and with different personas along that way, from discovery to licensing to ingestion and then to use, so that they are able to move really quickly when they need to evaluate a new data source or when they need to migrate one of their existing data sources to cloud native procurement and distribution. So to bring it all home, I just want to kind of wrap where we've heard on the B2B perspective, a lot of what goes in after data is in an organization and how it's pipelined and analyzed. But I wanted to add that third-party data component to the mix by bringing in data sourcing. And this is just an illustrative list of partners and services and data providers. But I really just wanted to tie it all together that by being able to have a first-party and third-party data ingestion, organization, pipelining, and analysis plan, the enterprises we work with are able to move faster, but securely to actually solve new business problems as they arise. And then on the provider side, to be able to publish data and create new commercial sources or distribution channels for their customers as well. So I'll bring it back to you, Anne, now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Vikas, I would like to now turn the presentation over to you for a Q&A discussion with all of the panelists.
Thank you so much, Anne. So it was a wonderful conversation. And Anusha, maybe I'd like to start off with you. It was very interesting to hear the changes in the business and how business is really trying to become very, very close with data. And the whole transformation program that you're driving internally as you move to a more modern data approach and data as a service approach, right? So the question which I had for you was, and maybe you may just want to share with our listeners here, how are you thinking about success metrics? I mean, as you think about innovation, as you think about delivering this capability to business, what does success mean for you, and what are the criteria that you are looking at to showcase to your stakeholders that you're making real progress?
Yeah, because that's a very good question. Just like any other product that you'd think about launching, we are treating this as a same product offering, right? It is about delivering a platform that is going to be enabling our product teams to get the business value faster. But then the other equation also is to make sure that there is adoption of the platform so that there is kind of innovation being driven by these data offerings. So we think of this as OKR around platform, which focuses on leading and lagging set of metrics, where lagging set would be measuring the business value being delivered from the data offerings that various domain teams are going to be leveraging, publishing, and creating new products and services, right? So they have a direct set of metrics around the business value. But then there are also leading metrics around adoption. So how many data sets are being published, how the product teams are actually able to publish more and more data sets, and what is the value coming out of those. And then I think, another key metric that we are focusing on is the developer experience, because this is ultimately about empowering our generalist developers to be able to use data being published in this mesh scheme. Therefore, assessing the developer experience is also one of the key metrics that we are going after.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. You're right. I mean, getting developers excited about availability of data has been the bane. It's good to hear that you're on the Holy Grail and that you're looking at it. Thank you, Anusha, for sharing that. I do have a question for you as well, and something, it struck me, right, how you are embracing, your comment around digital transformation and how, the future leaders are going to be companies which really, really embrace this digital transformation. One of the things that we often hear about the financial services industry is the fact that, you all are so regulated. I noticed that you are operating in 70 plus countries. And therefore, as you think about data, as you think about regulation in these different countries, as you think about AI and ML becoming a reality in your business, what are some of the perspectives there? I mean, what are you thinking about? Or how are you taking care of regulation, which tends to be very, geo-specific, if you will? So would love to get some comments on that from you.
Hey, thanks, Vikas. That was an interesting question. Today, as an organization, I think transparency on how the ML model arrives at the prediction is mission critical to our consumers and regulators who need to trust the model predictions if they're going to accept the decisions or not. So I think it's very critical to understand, what is the function of an explanation in the machine learning context? Things like, how did the model predict a negative outcome? How does the model make predictions? Why did the model make this incorrect prediction? And which features have the largest influence on the behavior of the model? I think some of these explanations, which can be auditable and meet the regulatory requirements, build that trust in the model. And human decision making is a critical component as well. I think one has to find the right balance of humans in the loop when applying data-driven technologies. I think human governance is hugely important since AI is still very nascent at this stage. So, the critical challenge right now, what organizations face is how do we mitigate bias throughout the AI lifecycle, as we have several data privacy laws which we need to comply to, as well as our consumer privacy laws as well. So just some brief bullets on how we can overcome bias. I think the data sets we use to train should be representative to overcome sample bias and prejudice bias, if you will. Secondly, one needs to validate the model results with human in the loop. We call that as augmented AI. And there are several tools in the marketplace like what if tools, AI fairness tools to examine your machine learning models. And then using this model explainability, one can provide transparency in the model predictions to our consumers and stakeholders. And that will make our regulators and, consumers more happy than ever.
Thank you, Sam. I think interesting perspective. I especially liked, your comment around empowering humans with technology and with data. And, I think this is one of an interesting trends in the industry and something to think about for all of us. Samantha, I had a question for you as well. You touched upon third-party data. I think if you were to have a discussion in the room, there is no doubt that, everyone is looking to supplement insights which are there in the first and second party data with meaningful third party data. I just kind of wanted to get some more nuggets from you in terms of, what's really worked. Can you give us one example from, of where you were successfully able to bring bring third party in for a company and, get the troops excited and, sort of help them figure out how it works and what's worked and what's not? We'd love to get some more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a couple areas quickly because I think it's a fairly interesting topic for AWS, the third-party sourcing, because we're not always just speaking with IT professionals. We're speaking with several different personas. So one area that's worked and one area where folks move quickly is when we're talking to a line of business leader who has a problem to solve very imminently or quickly. And one example that comes to mind for me is we were working with a restaurant company, and they're working on site selection, where they should open and close new restaurants. They had a problem to solve. They needed a third-party variable very, very quickly, and they were able to reduce their time to actually evaluate that data by using our service. Because of the streamlined licensing, management, and ingestion, bringing another feed in is fairly simple if you've already used it for other feeds. So that's one area, line of business. The other is in the technology space. I recall an example where I was working with a large insurer who had a 30-plus team managing FTP credentials. And they were really looking to reduce some of that data pipelining cost and that undifferentiated cost of maintaining credentials because they were looking horizontally. They had hundreds of data sources. And by streamlining some of that ingestion, they were able to actually repurpose some of those folks to higher order services and more interesting efforts in many ways. And then lastly, I'll give you one other thing as I'm thinking about it. Working with an organization and actually talking to their chief data officer, so not a technologist by trade, but someone who's thinking about ethical data sourcing and better organization and management of the metadata across their third-party sources, and was looking for a way to inspire their company to think more holistically about these topics. And Data Exchange was actually an interesting way for them to bring that up to the forefront because they can talk about some of the challenges they were having as an organization and then how to increase the rigor of their data sourcing and that metadata organization. So, and then last but not least, I guess procurement, cost optimization. That's probably the most obvious topic here. Who cares about third-party sourcing? But that's usually a stakeholder that we engage with as well.
Thank you. That was very nice. So, Noelle, we've had a very interesting conversation. You started off with the data mesh architecture. You saw Anusha actually practicing it. You heard from Sam, about not only just leveraging data for digital transformation, but you also heard him speak about, how do you put models into production? How do you bring about explainability of the model? How do you, sort of empower human decision-making using data assets? And then Samantha spoke eloquently about, how can you supplement your data sources in your company using third-party data? Help us tie it all together. You started off with a vision on data as a service. Can you bring it all together for us and help us close?
Absolutely. So, I guess this comes back to the point I was mentioning earlier on is data obviously is one of the most critical assets for an organization, right? Without data, you can't build AI machine learning models. You can't build applications. You can't do anything actually without data. No analytics, no insights, no applications, no AI machine learning. Data is the most critical asset. And I think, you really have to ensure that in order to actually succeed, you really obviously have to look at some of these modernized architecture, right? And delivering data as a service, not just for IT organizations like the developers and data engineers, but also for the business to function as well. Because we do see a trend where more self-service from the business side is going to evolve, where business users themselves would be accessing data and leveraging data themselves, as opposed to IT organizations doing it, right? What they have done in traditional sense. So definitely data as a service, is fundamentally a very important direction. And as I mentioned, there could be multiple approaches. You could have a data mesh, you can have data virtualization, data fabric, architectures. So definitely I would encourage organizations to definitely invest in data platforms, especially the modern platforms like the data virtualization, data mesh, data fabrics, to leverage a complete view, a 360-degree view, whether it's internal data, external data, third-party data, or even other types of data sources that really drive success for organizations, for applications, for insights, and what have you, right? And the focus should be more real-time, more self-service, more consistent and trusted data, right? And that's the most important element for these platforms,
Thank you, Noelle. Over to you, Anne. I think we are on the top of the hour.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all our speakers today. Vikas with Persistent, Noelle from Forrester, Sam with Crawford, Anusha from Constellation, and Samantha with AWS. You've all shared great insights and information. And thank you to our listeners. Please be sure to visit the resources section on your console for more information. On behalf of IDG and Persistent, I'm Ann Taylor.